We all value our privacy. Even if you aren't hiding some deep, dark secret, you still don't want strangers knowing too much about you, right? Well, your customers feel the same way. That's why there are so many laws that protect people's data privacy worldwide. If your business uses things like cookies and targeted advertising, you may be worried about these laws. You don't want to accidentally break any of them and face legal consequences. And that's why in this video, I'm going to go over some of the most important data privacy laws, plus some tips for following them. Before I go on, a disclaimer. I know this may come as a shock, but despite my obvious intelligence and eloquence, I'm not a lawyer. So none of this should be taken as legal advice. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into some of the regulations, starting with the GDPR. The GDPR, which stands for General Data Protection Regulation, is a law governing data privacy in the European Union. It's probably the biggest piece of data privacy legislation, so it's the most important one to know. Of course, if your business isn't located in Europe, you might think you don't need to worry about the GDPR, but that's not entirely true. First of all, the GDPR applies to any business that operates in Europe, even if they aren't located there. So if you sell to European customers, or even if a substantial number of Europeans visit your website, the GDPR still applies. And secondly, even if you feel 100% confident that you're exempt from the GDPR, it's still good to follow it. That's because most other data privacy laws contain similar requirements to the GDPR, so whatever laws do apply to you are most likely modeled on it. Okay, so what does the GDPR require from businesses like yours? Firstly, it requires you to provide a privacy notice on your website. That notice should inform users of what data you collect, as well as why and how you collect it. Secondly, users have to give explicit consent for you to collect their data. They should have the ability to opt out of any or all data processing if they so choose. Finally, you should allow users to access, correct, or remove their private data if they so choose. There are some other things in the GDPR too. It's a pretty big law, but those are the most important parts to know. There's also the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, which governs the EU as well. The DMA contains a lot of different regulations, but some of those regulations deal with data privacy. For example, under the DMA, you can't track users outside of the initial platform where they agree to be tracked. You also can't use their data for any purpose other than the one they agree to let you use it for. Before moving on, I'll also quickly mention the Data Protection Act. In combination with the UK GDPR, it regulates data privacy in the UK. All right, now let's move over to the United States. We don't have a single giant law that handles data privacy like the GDPR, but a lot of states do have data privacy laws in place. If I went over all of them, we'd be here all day. At the time of recording this video, there are currently 20 states that have passed data privacy laws, but most of them have similar goals as the GDPR. That said, one state we'll highlight is California, because its data laws are more extensive than in most other states. The main data privacy law in California is the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA. There's also the California Privacy Rights Act, or CPRA, which modifies the CCPA. These laws contain a lot of the same requirements as the GDPR. On top of that, though, they require you to let users opt out of things like targeting advertising and data selling. They also say that if you work with any third-party services or contractors, you have to hold them to the same data privacy standards as your own business. Oh, and while we're talking about California, there's also the California Online Privacy Protection Act, or CAL-OPPA, which outlines some of the specific details that have to be included in your online data policy. As for the other states, they mostly include the usual data requirements similar to the GDPR. If you want to know the specifics, though, be sure to look up the laws in whichever states you operate in. There are also some federal laws in place to protect certain types of data. In particular, there are laws regulating health insurance data, financial data, credit information, student education records, and data from minors. If any of those are relevant to your business, make sure you're familiar with the laws that deal with them. So far, I focused on the US and Europe, but if you operate in any other countries, you'll need to know the data privacy laws there as well. Several countries have these laws: Canada, India, China, and Brazil are some of the main ones, again with similar goals to the GDPR. As you can tell, the majority of data privacy laws contain the same types of regulations. That means you can stay in line with most of them by following a few basic tips. I'll walk you through some of those now. First and foremost, make sure you don't collect data from anyone without their clear consent. If you get that one right, you're already 90% of the way there. The easiest way to do this, which you've probably seen lots of websites do, is to greet users with a pop-up asking for their consent when they first visit your site. They should have the ability to opt out if they so choose. The second tip is to clearly outline your privacy policy. You can do this in the same place that you ask for users' consent. Make sure they can see exactly which data you plan to collect, as well as how you plan to use it. The third tip is to avoid using people's data for anything other than what you say you'll use it for. If you tell users that you're only going to use their data for targeted ads, but then you sell their data to a third party, you're in violation of several laws. So don't do that. And finally, I already mentioned this earlier, but make sure to get familiar with your local laws. Whichever country or state you live in, do some research to find out about any data laws in that area. If you live in Oregon, for example, you should get familiar with the Oregon Consumer Privacy Act. Well, there you go. That's the most important info to know when it comes to following data privacy laws. Again, though, I'm not a lawyer, so you should definitely take the time to research specific laws or just talk to a lawyer if you want detailed expert legal advice. Of course, if you're looking for expert marketing advice, you're already in the right place. We've got tons of helpful marketing videos on our channel, so be sure to subscribe and check some of them out as soon as this video ends, which is doing right now.